We're at Voxxed Thessaloniki 2017, and I'm super pleased to be joined by Scott Hanselman. Scott, welcome. Thanks for joining us. So, you've just literally walked out of the keynote room, having given the opening keynote on day 2 here. And that was about JavaScript and the rise of new virtual machines. So
it's kind of a historical tale. It's a story that I tell about a time that I met with someone at Intel who was a very low-level programmer, one of the people that built all the processors that we take for granted every day, and they had decided they wanted to become a web developer. So what would it look like if you taught someone who was a computer scientist who fell asleep and then woke up 20 years later after all of the yucky parts of the web were gone? So a modern web with JavaScript that runs in the browser as if JavaScript itself is a virtual machine.
Wow, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
And I know yesterday you were also talking, you gave another session with regards to information overload, which I think is something that we can all relate to. Certainly in not just developers, but everybody in the world can relate to that as well.
I think that developers around the world, and I think that this is cross-cultural, I see this everywhere that I travel, are afraid to admit that they are overloaded. They're afraid to tell their boss that they work late at night to just catch up. They work their 9 to 5, or their 8 to 6, or their 7 to 7. They go home, maybe they put the kids to bed, the spouse, the partner goes to bed, and then they stay up. And they think that if they just work a little bit harder for a couple of weeks, couple of months, couple of years, that they will dig out. It will never happen. So I think that we need to have kind of a reckoning as a community, as a technical community, that we are overloaded, and then learn which balls to drop. You just have to stop juggling and just drop a few balls.
Yeah. What's the best advice you can give to a developer who does feel overloaded?
I would say try to spend as little time in email as possible and train your coworkers that email is probably not the best way for you to communicate. If you're sitting next to a developer, you shouldn't be emailing them. You should be spending time with them face to face. My biggest takeaway is try not to check email before lunch. People use email because it feels urgent, it feels intense, it feeds the serotonin in the brain that you feel like you're doing something, but ultimately you're just trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon.
Yeah.
So don't check your email until after lunch, and then you're going to find yourself with this big block of free time that you really should be spending time doing your job. You'll get so much more done, and you won't have that sense of guilt at the end of the day.
And if you're a developer and you're working for a company and you're in a fast-paced environment where lots of pressures are put on you, I guess some people might find it difficult to approach their boss and say, hey, this just isn't quite working for me.
Yeah, it is a challenge. And it does also come from a place of privilege, right? If you are a younger person, if you're a woman, if you're an underrepresented minority, you might not feel like you have the job security to go to your boss and say, stop emailing me on Sundays at 2 a.m. But if you can have a sponsor or someone that will back you up, or a supportive boss or a supportive coworker who can help you and say, listen, it's not my job to answer your emails at 2 in the morning, and I'm going to stop doing that, and have them support you and say, yeah, it isn't her job or his job to do that, then I think you can work your way up to doing that.
Yeah. I think also, you mentioned email. Something like Slack for me is there's a dichotomy there for me personally, because I see the advantages of using that as a comms channel, but also I stopped completely about 6 months ago because I had 20 different Slack projects. Yep. And I personally just couldn't keep up. And so I
did the same thing. So you dropped the ball. You self-corrected. I think 1 or 2 Slacks is fun, but frankly, we just all need to realize that there is one thread in our brains. There's room, frankly, for one Slack. Slack just became multiple inboxes. Yeah. I have one inbox for my personal, one for my work, and that's it. Those are my 2 halves of my brain. But if there's 7 other Slacks, 15 other Slacks, I just uninstalled it.
Yeah, same here. Scott, thank you so much for joining us. I know that people that weren't fortunate enough to be here can watch your 2 sessions online on YouTube afterwards. So please do so. And enjoy the rest of your stay here in Greece.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for having me.